On my 50th birthday, the people I loved most staged my downfall. My husband placed divorce papers in front of me. My children, my own blood, looked on in silence. And with those signatures, they took the mansion, the business, and every ounce of wealth I had poured my life into. A celebration turned into a betrayal so complete, it left me with nothing but the truth. I had been replaced. I'm Marin. For years, I built a home, a business, a family. On my birthday, they handed me divorce papers instead of gifts. Please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification.
I remember that night clearly, my 50th birthday. The house looked beautiful. The dining table stretched across the room, polished and shining under the chandelier. A cake sat in the center, covered in white frosting and pink flowers. There were wrapped boxes near the sideboard, and the smell of roses filled the air. I thought my family had planned a surprise. My husband, Richard, had told me to dress nicely. My children, Anna and Daniel, had been quiet all week. I imagined they were hiding some kind of gift, maybe jewelry, maybe a letter, something to show me I was still loved, still important. We sat down for dinner. I waited for the singing, for the cake, for the laughter, but instead, Richard placed a folder on the table in front of me. He pushed it toward me with both hands, as though he was setting down something heavy. I looked at it, confused. "What is this?" I asked, my voice breaking the silence. Anna didn't meet my eyes. Daniel shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. Richard leaned back in his chair, calm, almost bored. "Papers. It's time, Sarah. This marriage is over." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Divorce. We've made the arrangements. Everything is already in order. You'll have a settlement, but the house, the company, the assets, they're ours now. The families." I stared at him, then at the children, my children. Their faces were hard, closed. Anna's lips pressed together, Daniel's eyes fixed on the table. Not one of them spoke to defend me. The cake candles flickered. Wax dripped down the sides, untouched. It was my birthday, and instead of gifts, they gave me betrayal. The sound of my fork falling onto the plate was sharp. It echoed in the silence, making me jump. I looked at Richard, waiting for him to smile, to laugh, to say this was some kind of mistake, but he only adjusted his tie.
"You'll be fine," he said flatly. "You'll still have money. You won't have to work again. Isn't that enough? Enough?" My voice shook. "After everything I've done? After everything we built together?" Richard's face didn't move. He had practiced this, I could tell. He had chosen his words long before tonight. "You'll sign them," he said. "It's best for everyone." Anna finally spoke. Her voice was small, almost rehearsed. "Oh, Mom, it's better this way. Dad explained everything. You'll understand." Understand. That word stung. I looked at Daniel. My son. My boy who once clung to me when storms shook the windows. He avoided my gaze, his shoulders stiff. "Daniel?" I whispered. He didn't answer. The room felt colder. My hands shook in my lap. My chest tightened as though the air had thinned. I thought of the hours I had spent raising them, cooking for them, sitting with them when they were sick, working beside Richard when we had nothing, and now, here they were, handing me papers as if I were nothing. I pushed the folder back across the table. "No," I said. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder. It's already hard. You're doing this on my birthday. You brought our children into it. Do you hear yourself?" He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "It's done, Sarah. Don't drag this out." The candles burned lower. No one moved to cut the cake. No one sang. I stood up, but my knees were weak. I had to grip the back of the chair to steady myself. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice trembling more with sorrow than anger. Richard didn't answer. Anna wiped her eyes, but said nothing. Daniel remained silent. I left the table,
my heels clicking against the polished floor. The roses smelled too sweet, sickening as I walked past. Upstairs, I shut the bedroom door and pressed my back against it. My chest heaved. The house felt foreign, like a stranger's home. I had thought the night would be filled with love. Instead, it was filled with betrayal. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked through the halls, past the portraits of our family, the pictures of vacations, birthdays, graduations. All lies now. Richard had gone to the office. Anna and Daniel had left early. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the untouched cake in the fridge. Its bright frosting looked mocking now. I opened the folder again. Divorce papers. His lawyer's name printed neatly on top. My name beside his. Legal words I didn't want to read. They had planned this. Not yesterday. Not last week. For months. Maybe longer. While I smiled, cooked, cared, and trusted. They were planning how to take it all away. I sank into a chair, pressing my face into my hands. The silence was unbearable. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. All day, questions spun in my head. How long had Richard been preparing this? When had the children turned against me? Had they always believed him over me? I thought back to small things I had brushed off. Anna avoiding me when I asked about school. Daniel snapping at me for no reason. Richard locking his office door when I walked by. The signs had been there. I had ignored them. Now they sat like stones in my stomach. I wanted answers, but I knew I wouldn't get them. Not from Richard, not from the children. They had chosen their side.
The house no longer felt like mine. Every corner whispered betrayal. Every picture frame laughed at me. I packed a small bag that night, not because I planned to leave yet, but because I needed to know I could. That night, Richard didn't come to bed. I lay there alone, staring at the ceiling, listening to the tick of the clock. I thought of our early years, the long nights building the business, the way he once looked at me, full of fire and ambition, the way I believed in him, trusted him, gave him everything I had. Now he was a stranger, sleeping in another room. The bed felt enormous, cold on his side. I pressed my hand to the empty space where he used to sleep. I closed my eyes, but sleep never came. By morning, I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same. The betrayal was real. The papers were real. The coldness in my children's eyes was real. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at myself. My reflection looked tired, older than the day before. My birthday had aged me years in a single night. I touched the glass, whispering, "How did we get here?" The woman in the mirror had no answer. I met Richard in my second year of college. It wasn't at a party or through friends. It was in the library. I was sitting at a corner table with a stack of books, highlighter in hand, focused on a paper that was due. He sat across from me without asking. I looked up, annoyed, ready to tell him the seat was taken. But he smiled in that way he always did, confident as though the world belonged to him. "You're Sarah, right?" he asked. I nodded, wary. "You're in Professor Allen's class, the economics lecture. I've seen you." I laughed lightly. "I'm in literature. Wrong girl." He tilted his head, studying me. "Maybe, but I'd bet you're smarter than half the economics students anyway." I should have rolled my eyes. Instead, I laughed again. That was how he was. He had a way of drawing you in, making you feel seen, even if you weren't sure you wanted to be. We started meeting in that library. Sometimes we studied. More often we talked. Richard told me about his dreams, his plans to own something, to build something.
He said he didn't just want a job, he wanted power, freedom, success. I told him I just wanted a steady life, a family, something safe. He nodded, as if that too was part of his plan. We fell in love quickly. By graduation, we were inseparable. By 23, we were married. The early years were not easy. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a noisy street. The furniture was mismatched, the paint peeling, but it didn't matter. We had each other. Richard came up with the cafe idea. He said people would always need coffee, a place to talk, a place to rest. I thought it was too big a risk, but his conviction wore me down. We borrowed money, rented a space on a street corner, and painted the walls ourselves. I learned to brew coffee, to bake muffins and scones. Richard handled suppliers, deliveries, money. I worked behind the counter every morning while he charmed customers and shook hands with anyone who looked like they had influence. The cafe did well. Then another. Then another. The small chain grew, and with it, Richard's hunger. He started investing, first in real estate, then in restaurants, then in businesses that had nothing to do with coffee. We worked side by side, long nights and early mornings. I handled staff schedules, payroll, invoices. He made the deals. He always said, "We're unstoppable, Sarah, you and me." I believed him. I believed in us. Years passed and success followed us. We moved into a bigger house. We took vacations we couldn't have imagined when we started. Anna and Daniel were born into a life of comfort with nannies and private schools. Back then, I thought we had it all. Love, family, success. I couldn't see the shadows that had already begun to stretch across us. The first cracks were small, easy to ignore. Richard began staying out late, business dinners, meetings, drinks with partners. At first, I understood. The company was growing. Someone had to manage the deals. But the dinners grew longer, the meetings later. I waited up for him some nights, only to hear the garage door close at 2 a.m. When I asked, he brushed me off. "Don't wait up," he said one night, loosening his tie as he walked past me. "It's business, Sarah. You wouldn't understand." I laughed a little. "You used to tell me everything." He didn't answer. He went upstairs without another word. I told myself he was stressed, that the company demanded more of him now. I chose not to fight, but the distance grew.
"But I used to handle things too," I reminded him once. "Payroll, orders, schedules. Remember the early days?" "That was then," he said. His tone was final, sharp. "Things are bigger now, more complicated. Just let me manage it." The dismissal stung, but I swallowed it. I didn't want to start an argument. The children were growing too. Anna, quiet and thoughtful, began pulling away. She spent more time in her room, writing in notebooks, listening to music with the door closed. When I knocked, she answered in clipped words. Daniel grew restless, quick to argue. He slammed doors when I corrected him, rolled his eyes when I asked about school. They adored Richard. They followed him around when he was home, eager to hear his stories about business, about money. They hung on his words, repeating them later at the dinner table. I began to notice how his voice replaced mine in their ears. If I gave advice, they sometimes dismissed it. "Dad says that's not how it works," Anna would say. Or Daniel would mutter, "Dad says you don't get it." It was small at first. Little comments. But they cut deep. I didn't see it then. But I understand now. The cracks were not sudden. They were slow, hidden, spreading under the surface. By the time you see them, the foundation is already weak. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. One night, I walked past Richard's office. The door was slightly open. His voice was low, urgent on the phone. "Yes, transfer it under my name." "She doesn't need to know." I froze.
My heart thudded in my chest. I waited, listening. She won't question it, he continued. I've handled everything. Just make sure the paperwork is clean.
The floor creaked under my foot. Richard turned, saw me, and ended the call quickly. He closed the folder on his desk. Who was that? I asked. Just business, he said smoothly. Nothing for you to worry about. When I reached for the papers, he slid them into a drawer. This isn't for you, Sarah, he said firmly. Leave it. I did. I walked away, though unease burned inside me. Another time, I found contracts on the dining table. Pages of numbers, company names, signatures. My name wasn't there. Not once. Even though I had been part of that company from the start. I asked him about it. Why isn't my name on these? He didn't look up from his drink. It's cleaner this way. Simpler for taxes. Cleaner? I repeated. Yes, he said. Don't make a big deal out of nothing. The words silenced me again. The children, too, began to mirror him. At dinner one night, I reminded Anna to finish her homework before bed. She snapped at me. Dad says you don't understand how hard my classes are. You should stop acting like you know everything. I sat back, stunned. Anna, I'm your mother. I'm not acting. She muttered, Dad's right, you just don't get it. Daniel grew sharper as well. Once, I told him to be careful with money when he bragged about spending. He laughed. Dad says you're not good with money. That's why he handles it. My throat tightened. Daniel, I managed our first business. Without me, there wouldn't even be a company. He shrugged. That's what you think. I didn't know what to say. I felt the ground shifting beneath me, but I couldn't bring myself to face it. Late at night, lying awake, I told myself it was normal. Teenagers push away. Husbands grow distant. Things would get better if I was patient. But patience only gave the betrayal time to grow. The seeds were planted long before my birthday. Seeds watered by Richard's lies, by whispers behind closed doors, by the silence of my children. I should have seen it, but I didn't. I didn't see it then, but I understand now. The candles flickered on the cake. The room should have been warm with laughter, but the air was heavy. The silence felt staged, like everyone had rehearsed it but me. Richard stood, holding a neat stack of papers, his face calm, his suit pressed, his voice measured. This is better for everyone, he said. His words cut through the room like glass breaking. My eyes moved from him to Anna, then to Daniel. Their faces were blank, unreadable, as if their expressions had been trained. I blinked. What is this? My voice cracked. Richard slid the papers toward me across the table. Divorce. We've agreed it's time. I looked at my children, desperate for them to laugh, to shake their heads, to tell me it was some cruel joke. But Anna kept her gaze low, and Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, face hard. You've agreed? I whispered. Agreed? With who? With each other? Without me? Richard's voice didn't rise. It was steady, rehearsed. This will make things easier, for the business, for the family. I stared at the papers, the neat black ink spelling out the end of everything I thought was ours. On my birthday? The words tore out of me. You chose today? You couldn't wait a single day? Anna finally spoke. Her voice was cold. It's better this way, Mom. We all knew it was coming. My hands trembled. All? You knew? Daniel's voice joined hers, flat and sharp. Dad explained everything. It's for the best. The cake sat untouched. Balloons floated weakly near the ceiling. The gifts, wrapped in shiny paper, felt like props in a play where I was the fool. Richard's gaze stayed fixed on me. Calm, detached. Sign them, Sarah. It's already done. I realized then it wasn't just him. It was them, too. My children, my blood. Together, they had outnumbered me, outmaneuvered me. The room spun.
My birthday had become my funeral, and the people standing over the grave were my own family. The days after blurred together. The papers were only the beginning. The lawyers came quickly. They moved with precision, each step already planned. They spoke in calm voices as if they were discussing weather, not dismantling my life. One morning, I returned from the grocery store to find the locks changed on the mansion doors. My key no longer worked. I rang the bell, knocked, called Richard's phone. No answer. The curtains twitched upstairs. Someone was home, but no one came down. I stood there, plastic bags cutting into my hands until the neighbors began to stare. I left with my head bowed. The bank called next. Accounts frozen. Credit cards declined. Years of shared money suddenly invisible, unreachable. I argued, shouted, begged. The woman on the line repeated the same phrase. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter. You're no longer listed on the account." Mrs. Carter. The name already felt like it belonged to someone else. Friends stopped answering. Invitations dried up. Calls went to voicemail. People I'd known for decades avoided me in grocery aisles, crossed the street when they saw me. Richard's story had reached them first. She was unstable, she didn't contribute, she made mistakes that forced his hand. Lies spread faster than truth, and no one wanted to stand against Richard. Not when his business paid their salaries, sponsored their events, carried weight in every corner of the city. Even family turned away. My sister said she couldn't get in the middle of it. My cousin stopped replying altogether. I was alone.
The house echoed in my memory. I saw Daniel running down the halls when he was little, his laughter filling the space. I saw Anna curled on the couch, reading quietly while I cooked dinner. I heard Richard's voice calling from his office, asking me to taste a new coffee blend. Now, the house stood locked against me. My suitcase sat by the door of a rented room, its zipper straining. My life packed down to clothes and papers. At night, I would close my eyes and still hear the echo of laughter in the halls of the mansion. But when I opened them, there was only silence, only walls that didn't belong to me. I had built a home, a business, a life. Piece by piece, they stripped it away. The weeks bled together in that small, rented room. The wallpaper peeled in the corners. The bed creaked with every shift. A single window looked out on a street where no one knew me, no one cared. Food lost its taste. I stopped eating. My stomach ached, but nothing stayed down. Sleep abandoned me. I lay awake through the night, staring at the ceiling, the betrayal replaying on a loop. Richard's calm voice, Anna's cold eyes, Daniel's dismissive shrug. I asked myself the same question over and over. How do you survive betrayal when it comes from the very blood you gave life to? I had carried Anna for 9 months. I had held Daniel through fevers and nightmares. I had built the ground they stood on, and still they chose him. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Smiles, birthdays, vacations. Richard's arm around me, the children's hands in mine. Proof that once we were a family. Proof that once love lived here. But the more I looked, the less I recognized their faces. Were those smiles ever real? Or were they rehearsed, practiced for the camera, for the world, while the truth grew hidden beneath? I tried to reach out. I wrote emails to Anna, texted Daniel. No reply. I called Richard once. He answered. His voice clipped.
"Don't call again, Sarah. It's over." The line went dead before I could speak. Nights were the hardest. The room felt colder after dark. I wrapped myself in blankets, but the chill came from within. Despair seeped into my bones. I whispered to myself just to hear a voice in the silence. I asked myself if I was broken, if I had failed as a wife, as a mother, as a woman. But no answer came. Only the hum of the old heater in the corner. There were moments when resignation pressed so heavy on my chest, I thought I couldn't breathe. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, whispering prayers to no one. I told myself, this is the end. I told myself there is nothing left. And yet, somewhere in the quiet, a question lingered. If this was the end, why was I still here?
It happened on a morning like any other. I woke in the small rented room, the same cracked ceiling above me, the same sagging mattress below. For weeks, I had woken with swollen eyes, damp pillow, a chest heavy with grief. But that morning, something was different. I sat up slowly. My body felt light, hollow, but no tears came. I pressed my face into my hands, waiting for the sobs to rise. Nothing. I stood and crossed to the window. The air smelled faintly of rain. Outside, the street was quiet, washed clean from the night. Beyond the buildings, past the road, I could see the stretch of an open field. The sun was rising there, pushing through the clouds, painting the grass in gold. I stood in that light for a long time. My chest tightened, but not from sorrow. A different feeling stirred. Not soft, not gentle, fire. I thought of Richard's calm face as he handed me divorce papers. I thought of Anna's eyes, cold and distant. I thought of Daniel's voice, dismissive and sharp. For weeks I had asked why. For weeks I had drowned in what I had lost. That morning, I whispered something different. You will not erase me. The words came out low, rough, but steady. I repeated them, louder this time. You will not erase me. It wasn't yet a plan, but it was a vow. The fire gave me energy. I sat at the small desk in the room, pulled out an old notebook, and began to write. Everything I remembered, every deal Richard had mentioned in passing, every supplier I had met, every meeting where I had taken notes while he bragged. Dates, names, figures, details that had once seemed unimportant now formed a pattern.
I dug through boxes I had managed to bring with me. Old contracts from the cafe, invoices with my handwriting, payroll sheets I had balanced late at night while Richard slept. I opened my old laptop, its screen cracked in the corner. Inside were emails, threads between me and suppliers, exchanges with landlords, decisions we had made together in the early days. Proof that I had been there, that I had helped build the foundation brick by brick. The deeper I went, the stronger I felt. They had underestimated me. Richard believed his own story, that I was just the wife, just the mother, just the shadow in the background. But I remembered, and I had evidence. When my pile of papers grew thick, I reached out quietly. I couldn't risk anyone in Richard's circle. I asked a former neighbor for a name, someone outside his influence. She hesitated, but finally whispered one, a lawyer known for her sharpness, her refusal to bend. Her office was small, tucked above a bakery. I sat across from her, hands shaking as I slid the stack of papers onto her desk. She flipped through them, her brow furrowing, eyes narrowing as she read. Finally, she looked at me. Mrs. Carter, you have a case, and a strong one. The words cracked something open in me. For the first time in months, I felt hope. We began building. Week by week, the file grew thicker. My lawyer taught me patience. Some nights I burned with anger, pacing the floor, fists clenched, imagining Richard's smug face. But she reminded me, anger won't win this. Strategy will. So I studied. I read through every document carefully. I highlighted, underlined, made notes in the margins. Each page was another weapon. I discovered silent partners Richard had hidden, men I remembered from the cafe, once friendly, now pretending they had never known me. I remembered handshakes, conversations, decisions made over late-night coffee, and now I had proof of those ties. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together.
When the court date was set, I felt ready. I was no longer the woman locked out of her own home. I was no longer the mother begging her children for answers. I was fire, focused, steady, prepared. The courthouse was cold. Marble floors, polished wood, the echo of footsteps down long halls. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, but I held my head high. Richard was already there. He stood near his lawyer, suit perfect, tie crisp, face calm. When he saw me, he smirked, a glance that said he had already won. Anna and Daniel sat beside him. My children. They didn't look at me. Anna's eyes stayed on her lap. Daniel tapped his foot, restless, avoiding my gaze. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to look away. The trial began. Richard's lawyer spoke first. His words were smooth, polished, rehearsed. Mrs. Carter was never involved in the company. She lived comfortably off my client's success. She has no claim to ownership. Richard nodded, lips curled in a faint smile. Then came the lies. Anna's voice trembled only slightly as she said, "Mom never handled the business. It was always Dad." Daniel echoed her, firmer, repeating Richard's lines as though they were his own thoughts. Each word pierced me. My children rewriting history. My children choosing his version over mine. But then it was my turn. My lawyer stood, calm and steady. She laid the first folder on the table, sliding it toward the judge. "These are payroll records, Your Honor, from the first cafe location. Notice the handwriting. Mrs. Carter's." The judge leaned forward, studying the pages. "Here," she continued, laying out emails, "is correspondence between Mrs. Carter and suppliers. She negotiated prices, managed deliveries, balanced costs." Page after page, document after document, contracts bearing both our names, invoices I had signed, emails proving my hand in decision after decision. The room shifted. Richard's smile faltered. His eyes narrowed. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently. The judge looked up. It appears Mrs. Carter was, in fact, a co-founder of the business. Her contributions are clear and well documented. The words struck like thunder. My breath caught. Richard's calm mask cracked. His voice rose for the first time, sharp and angry. "She's exaggerating. She's twisting things. This is ridiculous." But the evidence spoke louder. Paper didn't lie. The days stretched on. Each session was a battle. Richard's lawyer tried to dismiss the documents, to discredit me. My children repeated his words, insisting I had been nothing more than a mother at home. Each time they spoke, my heart broke a little more. But each time my lawyer revealed another piece of proof, my strength grew. And then came the turning point, the judge's ruling. Mrs. Carter is hereby recognized as a co-founder of the business. She is entitled to her share of assets and profits. Further proceedings will determine the extent of compensation. Silence followed. Richard's face turned red, his jaw clenched, fists tight against the table. Anna looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes for the first time. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his confidence shaken. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, my body trembling not with fear, but with triumph. It wasn't a full victory. I had lost a family, I had lost a home, but I had reclaimed my truth, my name, my place in the story. I had not been erased. The verdict gave me something I had not expected. Balance. I didn't get everything back. The mansion was gone, locked behind gates I no longer had the keys for. My children remained by Richard's side, their voices echoing his, their loyalty sealed to his world.
That wound stayed raw. But the court recognized me. The judge's words still rang in my ears. Co-founder. With that recognition came shares in the company, a portion of its profits, and enough properties to grant me stability. It wasn't wealth in the way Richard had claimed it all, but it was enough. Enough to stand, enough to breathe, enough to live without begging for scraps. I walked out of that courthouse lighter, not victorious, not defeated, something in between. People often imagine justice as a grand triumph, but true justice is quieter. It's the steady return of ground beneath your feet. I remember standing on the courthouse steps, wind pressing against my face. Reporters snapped photos, their questions sharp, their flashes blinding. Richard rushed past them, his jaw set, his shoulders stiff. My children followed close behind. Anna's eyes darted toward me for a fraction of a second, as though she might say something. But she didn't. She lowered her head and walked on. I didn't call after her. I didn't call after Daniel. That day, I accepted something painful. Blood does not always mean family. Family is not built only by birth. It is built by loyalty, by truth, by love freely given. And when those things are gone, the blood is only a reminder of what once was. I held the verdict in my hands, and for the first time since my birthday night, I felt steady. The weeks after the trial were quiet. No more lawyers, no more hearings, no more nights spent piecing through contracts like puzzles. Instead, there was silence. I thought the silence would undo me again, that it would bring back the old ache, the long nights of crying into my pillow. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was space. I stopped waiting for Anna to call. I stopped checking my phone for Daniel's name. I stopped imagining that one day they would knock on my door, ready to return. It hurt. It tore me apart. But somewhere in that tearing, I found release. I understood. Finally, I understood. I had been fighting not only Richard, but the image of a family that no longer existed. I had been fighting to hold on to children who had already chosen a side. Letting go wasn't surrender. It was acceptance. My grief shifted, like a tide rolling back. The ache remained, yes, but it was softer, duller, like a scar where a wound once was. I filled my days with small routines, cooking simple meals, reading books left unopened for years, walking through the park near my temporary apartment. Each step forward was fragile. Each morning felt uncertain, but there was movement, and movement meant life. I understood. Finally, I understood. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The city's noise no longer comforted me. Its shadows carried too many memories. So I left. I bought a cabin near the water. Not large, not grand. A small wooden house tucked near the shore, where waves kissed the rocks and the wind carried the scent of salt. The first night there, I lit a single candle. I sat by the window, the glass cool against my shoulder, and watched the water move under the moonlight. For the first time in years, I felt calm. The cabin became my sanctuary. Books lined the shelves. A small desk by the window held my notebooks, where I wrote thoughts, reflections, pieces of my story. Mornings began with sunlight streaming through the trees, soft and golden. I made tea, wrapped myself in blankets, and sat on the porch watching the world wake. Evenings ended with candlelight and silence. The kind of silence that wasn't heavy, but gentle. The kind of silence that allowed healing. I ran my fingers across the wood of the walls, rough and warm. I thought of scar tissue, how the body repairs itself after being torn. Scar tissue doesn't erase pain, it doesn't make you new, but it seals the wound. It reminds you that you survived. That cabin was my scar tissue. There were still nights I cried. There were still moments I remembered Anna's laughter, Daniel's small hand in mine, Richard's voice when it was once soft and loving. But the memories no longer broke me. They sat inside me, quiet, like photographs in a drawer. And with each sunrise over the water, with each page written in my notebook, I built a new life. A smaller life, a simpler life, but one that was mine. Sometimes I walk down to the edge of the shore at dusk. I stand barefoot in the sand, waves lapping at my feet, the horizon burning orange and red as the sun sinks. I close my eyes and I remember. I remember the birthday cake untouched. I remember the papers pushed across the table. I remember the silence of my children's eyes. For so long, I believed that night had buried me. But standing by the water, feeling the tide rise and fall, I know now, the day they tried to bury me, I was reborn. I live with scars. I live with loss. But I also live with strength I never knew I had. I understood. Finally, I understood. That betrayal was not the end of me. It was the beginning of someone new.